Today, Ben and I are going to be talking about the 2004 Matthew Vaughn film, Layer Cake. Ben, I am very excited about this movie that we get to talk about it for a multitude of reasons. One, I really enjoy it. Spoiler right there. But the second is I have fond memories of watching this movie with you because I got to witness your first viewing of this movie because I introduced you to it. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love it. And we've already referenced this movie multiple times on the podcast. So much so that it was actually in the introduction. Wow, that was redundant. But the introduction episode of the podcast where we talk about what we're planning on doing. Because Layer Cake is the film where you made me stop, rewind the movie.
Yes, I did.
And we watched the scene of Daniel Craig walking out of his office and then out of the building like 3 or 4 times because, and I'm going to get it right this time.
Yeah.
There was an excellent case of rack exposure going on.
Correct.
And you were like, and then you sat me down. And I think we talked about it for like 5 or 10 minutes where you were just telling me how difficult this was. And I was like, got a new appreciation for this film. But I digress. This is just the fun part of this movie of why I like it. But anyways, thoughts on Layer Cake?
So yeah, I just had a chance to rewatch this like super recently. In most ways, probably a little bit better than I remember. The exception maybe being like the build towards the end maybe isn't as clean as I recall. And a lot of that's just story and budget. Mm-hmm. No, it's excellent. And it's like something that's kind of overstated, just call something underrated. But I'd still maintain that this thing's kind of underrated. You know, you go on IMDb, it's at a 7.3. I think that's a little low. I don't know why. I'm thinking maybe because it gets compared to the earlier Guy Ritchie films. And actually, this was supposed to be a Guy Ritchie directed movie. He scheduling conflict. And so Vaughn steps in and does an excellent job. But no, it's really, really good. And the thing that grabbed me when you introduced me to it and you pop it in, and first I get that, you know, buttery smooth voiceover narration by Craig, but then it cuts to that wonderful tracking shot when he mentions that, you know, eventually it's going to be corporations that peddle drugs. Mm-hmm. And you get that wonderful, like sort of quasi CGI composited tracking shot where he's like in what looks like a high-end, I don't know, perfume store, but it's Coke on the shelves and stuff. Then it grabbed me. I was like, this is unique. Like this thing's going to be really, really good. Somebody doesn't just willy-nilly throw a scene like that in the beginning of their movie and then the rest of the movie's like average.
Well, and he does that, just to stop you, that he does that awesome kind of swipe pan where it goes from that drugstore or that store-bought drugs into a normal like pharmacy drugstore.
Yeah, there's a wipe there, and they were doing, I don't know, you could tell they were doing rotoscoping work in front of, it's pretty clean still. Mm-hmm. Like I could only see like one real quick artifact because I was kind of looking for it right in front of Daniel Craig's face. Because yeah, he goes up by it after it's changed, the product is changed on the shelves, and he reaches and grabs an item off the shelf. Yeah, it's like scenes like that at the beginning of movies. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm good. You've completely got my attention.
And the narration does a great job of explaining things in an interesting way, of bringing things to the knowledge of the person of both his character, what his goals are, where he's going, but also his take on society as well, which gives us even a deeper understanding about his character. So it's not just a simple, here's a ton of exposition, but it's also a way for the audience to learn about Craig's character.
Yeah, it's a good use of VO, but it also is a really, really compelling visual right from the get-go. That's important with a movie at this budget level with not a bunch of big name talent headlining it. And it obviously now, like the big thing when I watch it is just realizing how much this thing served as a dry run audition to play Bond. Like it's kind of impossible for me not to watch it through that lens and just look at certain shots and stuff he's wearing and situations he's in. And it's like, yeah, I can see why Barbara Broccoli like saw it and was immediately, I think this guy can play Bond. Yeah.
100%.
The only knock then would be is he's really, really thin, like much thinner. You know, he's a good 15 pounds leaner than when he goes to play Bond. And that's just the bulk up that he did. And older, a little bit older, a few years older. By the way, he's like 36 here. He looks so much older. Like, yeah, Craig's always looked way older than, like, a good 4 or 5 years older than he really is. Like, I think he smokes pretty prolifically, if I recall, so that doesn't help. But yeah, you can see it, the charisma, the delivery, the way he moves. It's like, yep, I think you got your guy. So, but it's interesting seeing him sit across at the beginning, sitting across from Mr. Tom Hardy.
Exactly.
And like thinking, you know, I don't think it's going to happen, but there was a little bit of a possibility there where you might have had this movie featuring 2 future James Bonds. But yeah, I think Hardy's kind of aged out. So
unfortunately, definitely with the way they have decided to make James Bond, I don't think either Hardy's even interested anymore, or
he's too old.
He's young enough to play it.
Yeah, they're going to go really young, I think.
But this is interesting. I really do enjoy this film. You are very correct. Obviously, it feels like a Guy Ritchie film. He was supposed to do it. Obviously, Matthew Vaughn produced a lot of the Guy Ritchie films, the previous ones. He was on Lock, Stock. He was on Snatch. And so there's a lot that he takes away. And it's interesting that also Matthew Vaughn brings a lot of the people that he kind of met in this movie along with him to his next movie, which we just talked about, Stardust. Sienna Miller's in Stardust. The guy who plays Crazy Larry is also in Stardust. So he brought some people along, which is kind of fun. I will say definitely there's a lot that's in this movie that Guy Ritchie kind of steals and has to repurpose for one of his follow-ups, RocknRolla, that he did. Like I think it's like 2008, 2009, he did RocknRolla. There's a lot of the same kind of points. And there's a lot that I love about RocknRolla more than Layer Cake, but there's a lot that I like about Layer Cake more than RocknRolla. And so I can kind of appreciate both of them for what they are.
As I recall, RocknRolla is a funnier movie.
Yes.
It's
definitely a funnier movie. It has the dialogue is a little more on point and faster than Layer Cake. This is definitely not a darker film, but a more serious film than RocknRolla. I can appreciate both of them, even though they're kind of a little bit similar in nature.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously feels like a right in line spiritual successor to Lock, Stock, and Snatch. They made the right pivot where it's more high society, organized crime, rather than kind of the dingier side of it that you get in those other 2 Guy Ritchie movies. I just forgot how good Michael Gambon is in this movie.
Oh my goodness.
So that was the part of it I forgot. It's like I remembered most of the first half of the movie, and then he shows up and I'm like, wait, I've forgotten all about this. It was, in some ways, it was a fairly fresh viewing because I'd forgotten a lot. I remember the ending. I remember him bleeding out on the steps, like that I didn't forget, but I was like getting to certain points and I'd forgotten that I even forgot that he shot, Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
So
and he came in with
I'd forgotten
the really
all about
special
that.
pistol.
I'd forgotten about that scene. So yeah, I kind of got a fresh look at it, and it's awesome. I forgot how much screen time Bern Gorman got in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he plays a really different role in this. Usually he's a much more like controlled. He always gets cast as a really like buttoned up, controlled character, and like in this, he's like totally unhinged.
Yeah, this is my second favorite performance of his. So the first one is in The Offer, where he plays the
he's
Gulf and
tremendous.
Western.
Yes, yeah, he's great.
Executive, whose name escapes me at the time. Yeah, he's.
I do wish selfishly that Sienna Miller had more screen time in this movie than she does.
But no, not so much. I was also excited to see Dexter Fletcher as Cody, who's also in Stardust, but he goes on to do, to direct and do other stuff. So he was a lot of fun. That whole duo between him and whoever his partner was, I forget exactly.
Oh yeah, I don't remember
the character that they're back and forth, or when he's yelling out when they went into the slums to go find it, and they find the girl's boyfriend who's dead, and he's running. Daniel Craig's character is running out and he's just saying, I need to find her, like I'll double your fee.
Right.
And he's like, I even want $10,000 for finding this guy, or 10,000 pounds finding this guy. And Daniel Craig walks off. He's like, no. And he's like, so is that a yes? And he's like, yes. So it's just like this kind of fun interplay of he's always out just for the money. But then of course at the end, when they kind of pretend to be cops and do this whole process, it's just absolutely hilarious. And I can never really tell if they're actually truly cops or just pretending to be cops, because they are they're confidence men, but it seems
it was a little, I don't know. It
seems so real.
I think they were real cops, but
they just play confidence men everywhere else.
Yeah. Colm Meaney that plays Gene is just fantastic in everything he's ever been in. I mean, I grew up with him in Star Trek. Like every time I've ever seen him, he's just fantastic. It's a deceptively great cast. I mean, you've got this Sally Hawkins that plays Slasher, and she's hardly recognizable in the movie. And she goes on to star in the Shape of Water. Mm-hmm. It's like, was that the same gal? And it's like, no, yeah, it is. And she's completely unhinged too. Like that's kind of the fun thing about this movie is most people get to be just completely bonkers versions of themselves on screen. There's only a few characters that are even remotely like, that's kind of the trick of the movie, right? Is that everybody else is just completely bonkers. And then Daniel Craig's character is like the smooth operator. Yeah.
The very subtle.
Yeah.
Not really emotional.
Him and
character.
Gambon and a couple others. But now, did you recognize this guy that plays Morty? George Harris is the General Otto at the beginning of Black Hawk Down with the cigar.
Mm. Yeah. Where he's like, would you like some? These are Cubans.
Yeah.
He's like, so are these. Miami's not Cuba.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that scene where he beats the crap out of that guy that fell asleep and cost him 10 years. Cost him
10 years, yeah.
Yeah,
which makes sense. Yeah.
It's so good.
So there's definitely something with how this movie sets up its characters, how this movie sets up getting Daniel Craig to do and be where he needs to be, but make those interesting. Because obviously Morty is kind of his muscle, but they need to kind of get Morty out of the way for a little bit for Daniel Craig to kind of be forced to be the one to deal with Jimmy or those kind of things. But then, of course, bring him back at the right moment so that way he keeps him from getting killed. But I'm actually very surprised because obviously this was a book beforehand, and the author of the book also wrote the screenplay, which is, generally speaking, at least everything I've read, very rare and very difficult just because it's hard for authors to give up certain bits.
It's rare that you do a direct adaptation and there's no other like co-writer. Mm-hmm. And apparently he got some of this stuff is from basically short stories from the streets of like real
happenings.
Yeah, real happenings within the layer cake.
Within the layer cake
of British organized crime. You know what? that one scene makes me laugh though, that like it makes sense later, but like when the cops are chasing them and they don't, and like nobody shoots at them, like it's like really weird. They're like within like 10 feet of them. The cops are, and they don't. Yeah, and they don't. But it makes sense later why that didn't happen. But it was like that feels weird. Yeah.
So going back to Michael Gambon, this is probably one of my favorite roles that he has done. Just kind of the conversations and dialogue that he has just makes me really feel like he's a very powerful guy. Like he just has that gravitas of being able to say things and exude power without really having to tell people he's powerful. Like I love the fact when he brings Daniel Craig up on the roof and they have him, hanging over, and he's like, Daniel Craig's telling him, Jimmy had me to go find your friend's daughter or granddaughter or niece or whatever. I forget exactly who he's trying to find, what relation to Michael Gambon. But Michael's character just goes, Mr. Troop here can find anyone in 2 minutes. Like, I don't need you. Why would I want you when I've got him? Yeah. So, and it's like just this, not distaste, but such a throwaway line of just, I don't care. I have the best, that just kind of exudes that power that he's able to kind of bring himself up from the street. And then, of course, at the end when he just takes everything with no problems.
Oh, yeah. On a rewatch, that ending felt a little bit anticlimactic, but I knew it was kind of coming.
Well, and then, of course, they get it back
Yeah, they do. I will say the movie's not always the easiest to follow, and I only say that from the names of characters standpoint. When people are like, when they're like referencing each other, it can get. I was like, it's because there's a lot of characters. Like they've got funny names, like Clarky and
Crazy Larry.
Yeah, Gaza and Nobby, and it's like, wait, who are they talking about? But eventually you kind of get used to the rhythm of the movie. And I do love that scene where he's like, thinks he's going to get the jump on Dragon.
Oh yeah.
And
then Dragon.
And he's like, all right, when he answers his phone. What was the fairly recent Guy Ritchie movie with McConaughey? The Gentleman?
Oh, it was The Gentleman. Yeah.
It felt similar to this.
It did. I mean, again, there's a lot of plot points that
even
reused.
visually with some of the stuff with like the greenhouses and the factories and stuff that they were in, there was stuff in The Gentleman that looks really similar. Like it maybe could even be the same location, but it just had a similar visual style to it as this. It reminded me.
Well, it does have some of its flaws, like you talked about. It definitely is a well put together film where it definitely moves and keeps you interested in what is going on throughout the entirety of it. So enough dialogue. The narration is not overused, but works.
I'm sure the ending kind of ticked some people off just because it's unconventional. But if you understand the world that they're exploring, that this guy exists within, it makes perfect sense. Like that it wouldn't be riding off into the sunset. Like
they actually shot that. That was actually supposed to be the ending.
Oh yeah, I know.
And then the studio wanted that. Yeah.
I've watched it on
it's actually terrible.
It's awful.
It just doesn't feel right.
No.
And then they accidentally, or I don't know if it was accidentally, but they showed the cut where he gets shot and the audience just reacts so differently to it and so unexpected that Matthew Vaughn was like, nope, we have to do this. This is how we're going to.
I think it's more faithful to the source material.
I believe so.
And I don't know if it is, but I'm saying in the context of the whole conversation with Gambon about being within the layer cake. And then he even was like, the key to this is being like a good middleman.
Yep.
And he kind of didn't take that advice at the end. Like he made himself, they're even going like, the king is dead. Long live the king. And then he's like, I'm out. It's like, I knew the first time I watched it, I was like, I had this sneaking suspicion that something was about to go down. It just was like a little bit. They even they didn't set him up or anything, but they still look. If you watch that scene, the way they look at him is really weird. Like they're like almost the group of them, like Morty and all of them and Gene are like, really? You think you're just going to be able to leave and get away with this? It's
definitely one of those fun moments of being surprised, because I was very surprised with this ending. Like I was not expecting this. This was very different. I expected the ride off in the sunset, but it was kind of one of those, even the protagonist has to deal with the consequences of his actions of, basically stealing Ben Wishasaw's, or however pronounce his name. I'm so sorry. But
and the character's name is what, like Sydney?
Oh, that's right. Sydney. Yeah. Sydney's character.
And it was Sydney. It's Sydney's girl that he stole, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it makes sense. It's like all of his energies were put into like covering himself with running this, trying to get out of this mix up with this drug empire. Yeah, he didn't really think through on how he handled that guy and then stealing it. Yeah, but it's interesting too, because that character, Sydney, like immediately regrets what he's done. Like it's a really interesting moment after he shoots him, because he has every opportunity to like finish him off right then and there, but he doesn't. And I guess that technically, if you want to get technical, it is an open ending whether he actually dies or not. I mean, it's likely, but he doesn't. But they do fade out to white, which is an interesting choice, because usually if you fade to black, that means he's gone. White could mean that he, I don't know.
Kept on.
He shot him in the chest. I don't know. It looked pretty.
That's hard to deal with that.
So how did you hear about it?
Oh my goodness. I think it was through my cousin Paul. He was the one who introduced me to layer cake, if I remember correctly. Or it could have been Scott Ross, Scott, if you're listening, let me know if this is true or not. But I can't remember because Scott, there was the time period Scott and I watched a bunch of movies together. He was the one who introduced me to Swingers and a bunch of this. So he could have also been the one that introduced me to Layer Cake. I don't remember, but it could also been Paul, because Paul was the one who got me into Fight Club, Usual Suspects, and introduced me to that. So I'm pretty sure it's one of those two people. Or if you are the person that introduced me to Layer Cake and I don't remember, I apologize. Let me know and I will make sure that we correct it somehow or some way. But
yeah, because in college we used to try to stay on top of trying to find these. It kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Like you had stuff like
Boondock Saints,
yep.
Equilibrium.
Yeah, the stuff that didn't get a wide theatrical release or even maybe a theatrical run at all. I haven't bothered to look at the box office on this, how much of it a run it even had, but
I don't think it did super well at the box office, but
no.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, because like 04, yeah, it would have been probably 05 or 06 that I would have seen it, because I think I showed it to you in 07, 08 maybe?
The budget for this blows me away though.
How much was the budget?
£4 million.
Holy cow, that's nothing. What do you know the box office?
11.8 million worldwide.
That's not
made 2.3 million in the US and Canada. They released it briefly in May of 2005 in the US and Canada, made like $81,000. So almost 12 million on a $4 million pound budget.
So
it's pretty
tripled your money. You probably didn't have a very large marketing budget, but
no. But the DVD sales are undisclosed, so and that's where this thing
probably did quite well.
It did really quite well, yeah. It is available to watch and is part of Prime.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say, like at the end of the movie, I just wanted to be Eddie Temple. I just wanted to have a bonded warehouse. It was just huge, so that I could just randomly drive cars in and change things out. I'm like, man, this is my goal. And then I want to go to those clubs where you can just smoke cigars and drink like whatever day, part of the day. And these are life goals for us, Ben.
Life goals.
What we need to do.
I think the rack exposure, and there's two of them, is worth discussing. I don't know.
Wait, where's the second one?
So there's they do the one where he exits the door marked private, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's an interior to exterior rack exposure, ends on the street. The other one is with the first time that him and Morty go to that country club thing where Jimmy's at.
That's right.
They walk from outside up the steps inside. So they do it twice. And in my opinion, the one starting from outside going in is like a little more challenging.
Yeah, those are impressive things.
Yeah,
that's the kind of fun for me. That's the fun stuff to learn.
And it's practice. It's not like they freewheel this stuff, right? Like they do run throughs with this, but what it requires is that camera is probably on a steady cam, because I'm not seeing any dolly track. It's possible that it was on a dolly, but it doesn't. Either way, it's moving. There's a guy pulling focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a first AC assistant cameraman running focus because they're moving with, and then you have another assistant, like probably a second AC, running the exposure on the camera, basically. And setting a mark for when they're outside, and then their final mark on their last point at the interior before they yell, cut. And he's got to dial that thing by hand as they move. It takes some finesse, and it's obviously the same was true of the first one where he exits the door inside. But I just don't see it done very often. Usually they'll just make an edit point. Like they'll just edit. They'll just, we're inside, now we're out. Like you hide it with the edit, but to have the gusto so fun to do it, it was like, but yeah, I totally feel bad knowing that I like straight up made you pause the movie just to like explain that monotony.
But see, this is why we're friends, because that was super interesting to me. And of course I had seen the movie multiple times at this point already. I had owned it. So I didn't need to.
It's not something I see much of. In fact,
no.
This is the movie that's like the standout for that, of like, well, what does a rack exposure look like?
And you seem to, it seemed to, the stop and talk about it seemed to not have affected your thoughts and enjoyment of the film itself. So, yeah. No. So you still liked it no matter.
It's just a hot shot. It was a hot shot director of photography is why they did that. It was just like, oh, this
Hey,
will be
let's try it
cool.
out.
Can we do this? It's really bright out. And yeah, I can do it.
Mhm.
But it does require them to overlight the interior of that building too. Like pour a bunch of light in there to get it even close. Like you still have to like overlight the interiors. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The camera work in this whole thing's fantastic. The cinematography, I don't know if they did a digital color grade, but it's a good looking movie. They do some neat stuff visually.
If you haven't seen this film, I definitely give it a go watch it. It's the closest thing to a rating that we'll give, but it's definitely enjoyable. If you like, especially if you like the James Bond or you like some of the Guy Ritchie stuff and haven't seen this, do yourself a favor and go see it.
For sure. It's a companion piece, I think, to all those movies that we like in that genre, in that British crime, kind of slick crime. It's right at home.
Yeah.
For sure.
Very
Yeah.
much at home.
And I'd be more apt to put this in and watch it than Lock, Stock.
Yeah. It's a little more slick.
I wouldn't put it above Snatch, but
no. Snatch is definitely, in my opinion, the best of all these kind of films. Though I do really like The Gentleman. I really like RocknRolla. Those are very, very fun. I mean, I like most of what Guy Ritchie has put out, and I like a lot of what Matthew Vaughn has put out, but this is definitely one of my favorites of his.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to say thank you to all of our listeners and watchers. We really appreciate you tuning in every week, hearing us talk about whatever movie comes to our mind we want to talk about. If you have any questions or recommendations or things you want us to talk about or reasons that we're wrong about something, feel free, shoot us a line on our YouTube channel, drop us a line on our email at cinemaa2b@gmail.com. Really happy you joined us, and we'll see you next Monday.
Thanks, everybody.